Learning Brachos Daf Tes Zion, top 10 teachings. The first teaching is the wedding group of Rabbi Elazar and the lesson of the Shema Loop. The Gemara says a story that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were building a chuppah for their friend Rabbi Elazar, and I guess it was like the wedding day, and Rabbi Elazar was wondering, can I maybe go out and I'm here for my wedding, can I learn a little bit? So he went to the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Yochanan, and there was a Tana. Tana is a word that means a person who would know the Mishnayos by heart, and he would repeat Mishnayos or Brachos, Toseftos. So this Tana was saying a Brisa, I believe, in front of Rabbi Yochanan. And he said, and here's what he said. If somebody's reciting the Shema and he makes a mistake and he doesn't know where he made the mistake, so you go back to like the earliest point that you know you didn't make the mistake. And if you get to what could be the end of there's reoccurring phrases in the first and second chapter. If you're not sure whether you're up to the end of the first or the end of the second chapter, you have to start again from the end of the first chapter. You can't assume you're further along. So Rabbi Yochanan then chimed in, right? Because this Tana, this fellow is reading these brises in front of Rabbi Yochanan, and he says that was only taught if the person didn't begin to say Laman Yirbu Yumechem V'Yimei V'nechem. There is different words that come out at the end of V'Hayim Shema before Vayomer. If the person broke the loop, so to speak, we assume that they know what they're doing unconsciously. Pasach Laman Yirbu Yumechem Sircha Nakiv Asi. The person is going by his habit. In other words, this is a very important thing in terms of memory. What that means is that we trust the person's innate memory of where they're holding in halacha, and that has applications in other areas as well. So, anyway, Rabbi Elazar returned. He liked what he heard. He returned back to the wedding party. The people, his friends, who were preparing his chuppah and I guess his other things for the wedding, and he told them what he had learned. And it's funny because they were there for his wedding, but they told him that Ilu lo banu ela l'shmo davar zeh dayenu. If we only came and heard this teaching that you said over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, dayenu, that would have been enough. Anyway, I was thinking, there's no coincidences. So, what's the inner meaning of Rabbi Elazar coming to his own wedding, his friends being preoccupied with setting up his chuppah, and he takes a break and learns this Torah, and then he shares it with his friends on presumably his wedding day, and they say, wow, like if we just came and heard that, it would have been enough. I mean, he is getting married. That's a pretty significant day. So what I was thinking is that everybody knows that when you get married, it's very exciting and beautiful in the beginning, but then it's almost like reciting the Shema every day. After many years, you get used to it, and you're not paying attention, and then you make mistakes, and you're not even aware of what paragraph you were holding because you're just doing it in such a non conscientious way. And it's a little bit like what would happen in a marriage, where after many years, who's really listening deeply to what the other partner is saying, and where's the love? Meaning, where's the attentiveness? And the problem is when you don't hear where the other person is and you're not sure, you have to go back to where you're sure of. And that's a way of communicating. That's what he was learning. He was learning the importance of when you don't listen and there's a mistake in communication, you have to reestablish the connection from the point where you know you were listening and paying attention. However, he said, there's some good news. Sometimes, even without listening, the habits that you have can also work for you. We can assume sometimes that you did do the right thing, even though you weren't paying careful attention. So we learn two things. We learn the importance of doing things correctly, because if you make a mistake, you end up having to spend more time fixing it than if you would have just paid more attention to begin with. But we also learn that we have to learn from our habits, because our habits, as much as they can lead us to make mistakes, they also have certain valuable characteristics that we have to learn from. And when Rabbi Elazar came back to his two friends who were building his chuppah, and they said, awesome, this is really, for this alone, we could have come here to hear this. This is like going to add so much to the chuppah, which is based on that, the binyan ad, the kind of ongoing union that you and your wife are going to have. So that was a thought I had in terms of the beauty of connecting the wedding to this teaching about the Shema, and listening to your spouse and hearing and making mistakes and learning how to fix them. Number 2 is reading the Shema from the top of a tree. The Mishnah says, Ha'umnin kohen b'rosh ilan u'v'rosh hanidbach. Workers who are working on a tree, or they're working on a platform of like they're on a wall that has a wide area to stand on. What do? They are able to read the Shema in those positions from those heights. On the other hand, they can't daven in those positions. The Mishnah also says, Chasan pater mikriya Shema, Layla Rishona v'ad Matzah Shabbos. A new groom does not have to read the Shema the first night till Saturday night. Imlo asa maisa, if he wasn't able to do yet the deed. The story of Rabbi Gamliel is he got married and he did recite the Shema the first night. Amar lo talmid of his students said to him, Limadatanu Rabbeinu shechasan pater mikriya Shema. Didn't you teach us, our master, that the chatan is not required to recite the Shema? Amar lahem einu shomei lechem levat lahimenu ameni malchus shemayim afilu shachas. I'm not listening to you that I would for a moment not accept upon myself the oneness of God. Okay, so we're going to focus on this idea of reading the Shema on the tree for a moment. Tana Rabban, the Gemara says, Korin birosha ilan uvirosha anidbach, right? One would read the Shema on the top of a tree, umispal birosha zayish uvirosha teina. But as far as davening goes, you could only daven under certain trees. Probably those trees are bigger and safer. So most people learn an olive tree or a teina tree. B'shar kol ilanos yardin lamata umispal. On other trees, you have to go down to daven. Ubalabayis benkach ubenkach yard lamata umispal l'fi she'ein daitem yishavas alav. The owner, who doesn't, he's not the employee, he's the employer, he has to go down because his mind isn't settled there. I wanted to say something about this, but I'm going to look into Rishimas Shiurim. The Shiurim of Rabbi Soloveitchik is written by Rabbi Herschel Reichman, who gave me permission to spread the teachings of Rabbi Soloveitchik from his Sefer. I'm actually going to share a teaching of Rabbi Reichman later on tonight, number 5, but we're not quite there yet. Okay, I heard from him this week. Let's see a little bit about the tree. Okay, that's number 3. Well, I just wanted to say that there's 2 elements here. One is that in general, there's requirements of the ideal place that one should stand, but most of the Rishonim understand that this particular Mishnah isn't really about the ideal place versus the non-ideal place. We understand that the tree is not the ideal place. It's just a question of whether it's kosher whatsoever, and that's how most of the Rishonim learn it. Now, just as a prelude, there seems to be a very big difference between Kriya Shema and davening in many ways. Kriya Shema, for the most part, with the exception of first verse, Shema Yisrael, can be said in any position, can be said in while one is moving, needs a certain level of kavana, needs a certain level of intention, but it doesn't need that much intention the way the amida is supposed to be said. The amida is supposed to be said standing. It's supposed to be said ideally facing the Makam HaMikdash, the temple. But more than just that, which leads us to number 3, davening needs more kavana. So that's what number 3 is this differing levels of kavana from the Shema to the Shemona Esrei, and understanding why. So we said that if you look in the Rashi here, Rashi tells us in the Mishnah that Mash'in Rishayin Lasos Kain B'tfila. Rashi says Titzlosa Rachmehi, because the amida, the davening, is a call for mercy. It's one communicating with God one's deepest needs. Ubai kavana, and it needs kavana. Now, it doesn't just mean it needs kavana like that you know what you're saying. It needs even more kavana, like Rabbi Soloveitchik likes to point out. It needs the kavana of no da lifnei mi ata omed, to know before who you are standing. In other words, in a certain sense, Shema isn't really that you are standing in God's presence as much as you are reciting a verse about God's existence. Of course, if you could feel that you were standing in God's presence when you recite the Shema, that would be exemplary, but it's not actually a necessity. What's required is that you say the words and understand what it is that you are saying, which does include the concept that God is one. But I could be talking about someone without talking to them, and I could mean what I'm saying about them without them actually being present. Shemona Esrei requires presence, requires one to feel a certain closeness to the Ribono Shel Olam. So that's the kavana that we're talking about. And that you can't have while you're standing on a tree, and you'd have to come down for that, unless it was the big trees, like the olive tree. Okay, so that's a little bit about number 2. Number 3, that was number 3, differing levels of kavana for Shema. Number 4 is workplace davening and benching, and some of the details of the Gemara. The Gemara goes on and says the following. Number 4. The Gemara says, Hapolim shayu osam malacha etzel balabayis, workers that are working for the balabayis, for the landlord, so to speak, for the owner. Korin kriya shma u'mevarch lefnei alachra. They say the Shema with its blessings that precede it and come after it. V'ochlin pita u'mevarch lefnei alachra. They eat their bread, their lunch, or whatever it is they're eating, and they make the blessing before it and after it, right? The birchas hamason after it. Mispalel and tefillah shel Shemona Esrei, and they recite the full Shemona Esrei. Avol ein yodin lifnei hateva, but they don't have a chazan that does all the extras, like the kedusha, the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, and so on. The ein nosin kapeim, they don't do tachnun. Vatanya me'ein yudches, but that seems to contradict another brisa that says that they would do an abbreviated version of the 18 blessings, also known as Havinenu, in some places. Amrav Sheshus lo kasha Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Sheshes says, oh well, that's just a debate. The Gemara doesn't between these two Tanaim. And then the Gemara says, well, if it's just that debate, what does it have to do with Poland? I feel a kol adam nami. I mean, according to Rabbi Yeshua, he says anyone who's busy can just do this abbreviated version. It doesn't need to be about workers. That rather, el adi v'adi Rabbi Gamliel. Both opinions are the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel that v'lo kasha kan ba'osen b'scharan, kan ba'osen b'sudasan. We're talking about two different types of contractual workers. One is getting wages. The other is just getting their meals. So the one that's getting their wages, they have to abbreviate the Shemona Esrei. The one that's getting the bare minimum of just eking out like this, their meals, and that's it, not really getting a salary, they can do the full Shemona Esrei. The Gemara asks a question, and I don't know if it's a question here. Let's say Kuf Beis. No, it's not a question. It's a proof. Okay, good. So that is number 4. I just wanted to add in a little bit. The commentaries say that today that this is the bare minimum, but that the relationship between workers and their bosses changed over time to the benefit of the workers. And that includes that most bosses today, on average, are understood to allow their employees to do a full davening. And therefore, these kind of mini davenings that we're discussing, or which blessings you make and which blessings you don't make, are not really relevant for the halacha today, because we go with the assumption that today you could go through the whole davening. But it is an interesting question, because certainly you might have, if you are a boss and you have from people working for you, do you literally intend that they should go to a minyan for Shacharis, Mincha, and Marv? I don't think so. So I think I think it depends. I think there's a certain reasonable enough time, perhaps some of those minyanim, but not necessarily all of those minyanim. And it again, the question will reappear in modern times in terms of a balance between the need of the employee to meet the requirements that the company and that the boss is putting upon them, and their own spiritual life, and there's a balance there. Okay, let's go on with number 5, which is the Mishnah says that the chasan is not required to say the Shema at the beginning. The Gemara explains, because number 5 is about why isn't it a mitzvah for a mourner to be in a state of distress that would then be considered osik b'mitzvah, pater b'mitzvah, in the sense that they shouldn't have to read the Shema as a mourner during the Shiva, which is not the case. A mourner during Shiva has to read the Shema. Let's read this inside. The Gemara says on Tes Zayin Amid Beis, and it's a limud that has to do with Balechtacha Baderech, is when you're going on your way. For when you're sitting at your home and when you're traveling on the way, you have to recite the Shema, provided that you are doing your own personal things. But once you're doing a mitzvah, then the principle of ha'osik b'mitzvah, pater b'mitzvah, kicks in, and you don't have to say the Shema. The Gemara says, "Ihachi my ira konas esabsula." Why does the Mishnah then have to give the specific example of somebody who marries a bsula? Afilu konas esalmana nami, even if he marries a widow, he still doesn't have the issue of her being a bsula, but he still has a mitzvah to be with her. The Gemara says, no, hachatarid v'chalotarid. In the case of the basula, he is in a state of being, a little overwhelmed figuring this out. In the case of the almana, he is not. The Gemara says, well, if the reason is because of a mental state of being kind of preoccupied, is a better word, better translation of tirda. Imishum tirda afilu tavas v'nasabayam. Even if he's in business and he hears that his stocks are falling, his ship with his merchandise is sinking, Nami, he would also be preoccupied, clearly, and in a state of agitation, and shouldn't have to read it. And that's not the case. Alma Amravi Abba Barzabda Amarav Avel Chaye B'chol Mitzvah B'Torah. We say, for example, an Avel is required to do all the mitzvahs in the Torah, which is in stark contrast to an onen, who is not required to do the mitzvahs in the Torah, with the exception of the negative mitzvahs. But mitzvahs aseh shasman gram, an onen does not have to do, but an avel during the Shiva does have to do all the mitzvahs. Chutz b'nat tefillin, with the exception of tefillin. Many people just say that that's the first day. Shorei never behen pe'er, because the prophet refers it to as something of glory. Shneimar pe'ercha chavush alecha. I think that is talking about the time where God tells the prophet, I think it's Aeschylus, that his wife is going to die, but that he should not mourn her in the normal ways that you would mourn your wife. Let's see if it's in Aeschylus. Yeah, 24th chapter of Yechaskel. So, okay, let's go back to the text and so the Gemara says. So the question is, why would the mourner have to recite the Shema? Isn't he or she in a state of agitation or preoccupation with their loss? So the Gemara has an interesting answer that we're going to talk about here. Hasam tirda de rishus hacha tirda de mitzvah. In the case there of the mourner, his preoccupation with his loss is just one of permissibleness. It's not required. It's not a mitzvah. But here, in the case of the chassan marrying the basula, it's a mitzvah. Well, that's a good question because, first of all, there's a whole conversation there's a machlokas rishonim about if the being in Avel is a mitzvah de oraisa or derabanon. Everybody agrees that there are certain mitzvot associated with the mourning process, such as the burial, and other things, including what one can't do as an onen. But the question is there like a mitzvah to mourn? We do know that there's a number of times that the Torah talks about the Jews mourning Aaron, for example, or Jacob. So there's a lot of mourning that's mentioned. Does that make it a biblical requirement to mourn? Is it for 1 day? Is it for 3 days? Is it for 7 days? And the Rishonim debate and discuss this. But be that as it may, let's presume that there is some mitzvah, some in biblical and some in rabbinic. But either way, why is the Gemara dismissing the mourning, the sadness of the mourner, as if it's not a mitzvah? It's problematic. It's troubling. So, there are a variety of answers, but I saw Rabbi Reichman this week. I mentioned that I told him I'm using his sefer and even sometimes showing the actual sefer in the video, and he encouraged me to do that and spread the teachings of Rabbi Soloveitchik. He's very happy to do that, and I told him what the shir is on, and he was very happy to hear about it. And he shared this insight. He asked this question to me at the wedding, and I gave him the answer that was written in his sefer. He had another answer. Maybe it's also written in his sefer. So I'm going to give you his answer. His answer is that the mace, part of the reason why we mourn is because we want to reflect the feelings of the deceased. The deceased is distressed to be away from us, so we're distressed in being away from him or her. But the mace during the Shiva, maybe during the Onan period, the mace doesn't want you to do Kriya Shema. The mace needs you to take care of the Kvura, to take care of the Levaya, the Hesped, and so on. But once that is done, once the Onan period is over at the end of the burial, and now it transfers into Shiva, the mace wants you to say the Shema. The mace wants you to daven. So even though the mace is okay with you being sad for your loss of them, he doesn't or she doesn't want that loss to make you so depressed that you can't daven anymore. And that's a difference between being an onen and sitting Shiva. Being an onen, it's okay to be that upset. And the mace is okay with you not davening. But during the Shiva, things have calmed down enough that you could be comforted. And part of the comfort and being calm is the fact that you can now say the Shema. So that was the answer that I heard from Rabbi Reichman a couple days ago. That's number 5. Number 6, it's showering during Shiva. There's a story in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Brachos Layla Harishon Shemeso Ishto. It's talking about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, author of the Mishnah. The first, actually, is it talking about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, or is it talking about Rabbi Gamliel that we were just talking about before? Rabbi Shimon, must be talking about Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay. It's Rabbi Gamliel, because that's the previous Mishnah. So Rabbi Gamliel washes himself, which would be bathing himself. He bathed himself Laila Harishon Shemesa Isha, the first night after his wife had passed away. Amr lo Tamid, of his students told him, Limadatana Rabbeinu, didn't our master teach us? Sha'avel Asr L'Rchotz, that an Avel, a mourner, is forbidden to wash bathe himself. Amr Lahem, he responded to his students, Eini kashar b'nei Adam, I'm not like other people. Istinis ani, I'm very finicky. Okay. What's the story here? Let's look at what Rashi says. Rashi says that Aninus Layla Harishon Shemesa Ishto V'nikra Bo Biyom, that she was buried that day. V'alf pisha aval aser berachitza hu rachatz k'damar taima isnisani v'hu adam mu'unag u'mafunak. He gave his reason, because he was very uncomfortable, and somebody who needs certain creature comforts, otherwise they will be very irritable. Okay, so this idea of the istiness, I'll read a little bit of Tosfos here. Tosfos says, the ikatsar, by the istiness, imlohe arochetz, he would be in a state of discomfort if he wouldn't wash himself or bathe himself. The reason for the prohibition is because it gives one pleasure. It's not to literally torture a person. If a person will be tortured by not bathing, you don't have to undergo tsar. By the way, that's not required. The gam lachaf rosho isle ervuvia, and then Tosfos starts going on and saying, if you really had discomfort for some reason, you could wash yourself. Now, first of all, I want to talk about the fact is that a shower is not near. The Gemara doesn't talk about shower. The Gemara talks about bathing. So there is an additional leniency of taking a shower over taking a bath. So today, I think most people are an istinus on some level, not necessarily that they have to take a shower the night after the burial, but I don't see most people today being able to really go through most of a week without a shower. So first of all, the shower is not a bath. It's not as bad. And second of all, there are a lot of leniencies if somebody really is just washing off the sweat and the uncomfortableness that they feel. So what they would be encouraged to do, according to certain poskim, is to take a very quick shower. Don't luxuriate in the shower. Don't anoint oneself on the shower. Just focus on getting clean so one doesn't feel dirty and disgusting. Again, maybe one way of doing it would be a suggestion just to get oneself wet very quickly and then just use soap and shampoo while the water isn't running, and then turn the water on again and rinse oneself off. I used to give that advice to everyone because I wanted to save the planet, but now I've stopped giving that advice. But I'd say that perhaps during Shiva, that would be an appropriate thing to do, is not to take a full shower, but to take an abbreviated shower so you're getting clean, but you're not getting the advantage of sitting under the water for 15 minutes and enjoying it. You're just turning the water on, getting wet, turning it off, soaping up, and then turning the water on to rinse yourself off, and that's it. Other people don't like to use warm water. They use, I wouldn't necessarily say cold water, especially in the winter, but water that's not as, I don't know if you're required to do that, but the idea is that there are different ways that people do where they maintain a basic level of hygiene, but don't act in regular ways. Speak to your rabbi to find out what might work for you. So that's just a little bit about number 6. And now we're going to do number 7, which is, number 7 is, the Gemara says, my time of the Rabbi Gamliel. What's the reason that Rabbi Gamliel did this and didn't not take a bath? Kesavar Aninus Layla derabanon. He held that the Aninus of the night is only from the rabbis, and he brings a quote for that. But I wanted to take a moment to talk about Aninus versus Aeschylus. There's a lot to talk about. Rabbi Reichman, quoting Rabbi Soloveitchik, brings a debate between Maimonides and Nachmanides in terms of whether an onen has the laws of the Shiva, meaning in certain respects, an onen has their own set of laws, like that are stricter in some measures, and according to the Rambam, less strict in many other measures. Where they are stricter is that an onen is not supposed to eat meat or drink wine, which are permitted for during the Shiva, but they are forbidden for the onen. But on the other hand, an onen can wear leather shoes, which is forbidden during the Shiva to wear leather shoes. On the other hand, according to the Rambam, at least, the onen can shower and bathe. The person sitting Shiva after the burial, that is, can no longer bathe. So the Ramban, however, holds that with some few exceptions, we do have the mourning laws already applied to the onen even before the burial. The question is, how do we learn the Rambam? There's 2 ways of learning it, Rabbi Soloveitchik says. One is to say that Shiva is what begins the laws of the mourning, and the onen has its own separate laws. The other is to say that the laws of mourning are theoretically beginning once the person loses the relative, but they're not applied, they're held back for a reason during the onen period, because the onen is osek b'mitzvah. The onen, just like the onen doesn't have to put on tefillin, the onen also doesn't have to sit on a little chair and worry about wearing freshly laundered clothes, or worried about, not taking a bath, because the onen's preoccupation is with the funeral arrangements, making sure that his or her loved one is going to get buried, and there's going to be eulogies delivered, and there will be people there, and that's their main preoccupation. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says it could be that the Rambam holds that in theory the laws of Aeschylus would apply to an onen, but practically speaking they just don't, because it has the statuses of osek b'mitzvah pater b'na mitzvah. That is how Rabbi Soloveitchik explains that it's possible that the Rambam doesn't really have 2 distinct periods, a period of being an onen, and then the mourning only starts after the burial. But what it is that the mourner is a mourner as soon as the death occurs, but the application of those laws are just temporarily put on hold, so the focus can be on getting the burial done. Okay, that's a little bit about Rabbi Soloveitchik on what level of distinctions there are. Even if there are solid distinctions in law, they may not be as solid in terms of their underlying principles. They may have more fluidity there. Number 7, I just did, Aninus Layla. Number 8 is a hard one. Avadim and Mourning. If you're really interested in what I wanted to say, but didn't have time to prepare, I encourage you to get the book on Maimonides by Moshe Harbatal and have a look on his chapter on the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam's attitude towards Avadim, towards slaves or servants, to see a ingenious kind of attitude that Harbatel sees in Maimonides. But at face value, we see two competing, contradictory attitudes towards slaves in the Gemara here and in the Mishnah here. One sees them almost like family, and the other one sees them as property. And obviously, it's troubling. We've outlawed slavery, not just in the United States, but it's been a thing in the past for hundreds of years for definitely most of the Jewish community. There were, of course, some Jews who were, like the rest of the people in the United States, that did have slaves back in their day. And sadly enough, a lot of anti-Semitism is based on primarily a false claim that the Jews were like controlling the slave trade, which is not true. They were involved in the slave trade just like they were involved in anything and everything that there was business in, but they weren't definitely controlling that by any stretch of the imagination. But we do have this Gemara, and you have these two opinions in the Gemara, so we're going to take a look at that. So the Gemara says that, back to Rabbi Gamliel, Shemes Tavi Avdo, when his servant Tavi died, Kibo Olav Tanchumin, he accepted mourners, like he sat Shiva for his servant. Amrlo Talmidav, his students told Rabbi Gamliel, you, Master, taught us that you don't accept comfort like a Shiva for your servant. Amr lahen, ein Tavi avdo kishar kol avadim. My servant Tavi is not like any other servant. Kosher haya, he was kosher. Okay. The problem is, that's a beautiful story, but then there's another story with Maisa Shulchasa Shel Rabbi Elazar, a story in which the maidservant of Rabbi Elazar passed away. Nichlasu Talmidav Lonachma, and then his students, they wanted to comfort him, and since he saw them, he went up to the attic. They went up they chased him. Then they chased him around the whole house from room to room, and they finally caught up with him. And he basically he tried to push them away. Let's see what that means. Like, I figured you'd figure out that I'm trying to get away from you because I don't want you to do this. But now that you're giving me no choice, I'm going to have, I was going to pour a little bit of lukewarm water on you. Now I have to pour the hot water on. I mean, it's a metaphor. Didn't I teach you guys that we don't do this for servants? And went through all the laws, a bunch of the laws of mourning that we don't do for servants. So the question is, well, which one is it? Obviously his students thought that this maidservant was an important part of his life, that they wanted to wish the rabbi condolences. They wanted him to sit Shiva for her. And he ran away, and he said, no, I taught you this. In contradistinction to Rabbi Gamliel, who the opposite happens, right? His students say, why are you sitting Shiva for her? or for him, right? There it's a male, Tavi. Didn't you teach us that you don't do those things for a slave? And he says, no, my servant Tavi is different. By the way, there's a series of these statements. Tavi is different, whether it has to do with the sleeping in the sukkah and other things. Tavi is different. So I want to quote the Rambam to us, a very important Rambam that a lot of people don't know. The Rambam says that when a kosher person dies, Shiva should be sad. If the person doesn't have actual relatives that are mechuyev, that are obligated in sitting Shiva, the community should send 10 representatives to sit Shiva in their home. They should have minyan in their home. And those people should sit on low benches or chairs like they're sitting Shiva. And they should wait for other people in the community to attend to them as if they were mourning, because they are, in fact, mourning. So there's this idea that you do mourn for people even though you're not their blood relatives. It does exist. And how much more so if you're close to them, the closer you are, the more you'd be required to mourn for a kosher person. And in that sense, even though they're not related by blood, Rabbi Gamliel accepted this kind of relationship with Tevi to have this sincere love for him and to sit Shiva for him. Not every story in the Talmud reflects that same relationship between the master and the servant, but certainly there is a paradigm that does exist like that. So I just wanted to point that out. It is not a finished parsha, so to speak. We'll leave that open. That's number 8 about servants or Avadim and mourning. Number 9, I'm going to do more Chassidut. The idea that we only call 3 people Avot, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and 4 people Imaot, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And the Gemara says, why is that? Is it because those are the 4 that we know we all descend from? That's not the case, because we don't know which of the Imaot. We all come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We don't know if we come from Rebecca we come from, Sarah we come from, but we're not sure whether we come from Rachel or Leah or Bilhah or Zilpah. So the Gemara says, well, it's because those 3 forefathers and those 4 foremothers, they're like the most important. So that's what we call them. In Chassidus it explains that we each have a part of the 3 fathers and the 4 mothers in us. You could understand it kind of from a psychological perspective, like a Jungian perspective. For example, Abraham is chesed. So what that would mean is that when we read the story of Abraham every week, every year in the Parshiot and Bereshis that deal with Abraham, what we're doing is we're really reading about a part of ourself. So, for example, a lot of people have a weakness. Love is their weakness. They're too kind to the people they care about. And you'd say, why is that a problem? What's wrong with loving the people that you're close to? Well, the answer is if you love your kids too unconditionally and don't really train them and give them consequences for the wrong action, they may misunderstand that love and just think that they could always do whatever they want, and they'll misbehave because of your lack of consequences. So every time we read about Abraham, we also read about the potential not just of love, but also the problem of love, the problem of too much chesed. And the rectification is that God says, goes to some extreme, which is crazy, where he tells him, Kachna es bincha es yichidcha asher ahavta, es Yitzchak, right? Take the son, the one that you love, Isaac, and take him to this land that I'm going to show you, and bring him as an offering. So in Chassidus and the Ishbitzer, it's a crazy idea. Why would God tell somebody something like that? But what it is the test of Abraham is saying, can you overcome who you are so set in being and become something else that isn't just that nature that you have so strongly in you. So in that sense, but what does that mean? That means that the embodiment of chesed that Abraham had was so intense that he was the merkava, the wheel, so to speak, of the chariot of chesed, and therefore ein koren la'avos ela l'shlosha, because he embodied that mida, that attribute, and likewise with Yitzchak and Yaakov and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, they each embody an attribute that we have within us. We call them the avot and the imaot. On the other hand, the shvatim don't have that designation. The only person who gets close, in a sense, is King David, because he's considered the fourth wheel of the chariot. That was number 10. Okay. Thank you for watching. Good night.